Tom, it's a particular delight to have a chance to talk with you because often we've been on the same table at dinners and so on. And I always think that if we need anyone to be the sort of source of, what the company is about and its history, you're one of the people, because you were master quite a while ago now. Is that right?
Yes, Master. It's a privilege to be on your program and a great honor as well. But yes, I was master of the stations in 1990, and I joined the company in 1973, well, 72 as a freeman, then 72 as a liveryman. Yeah.
That's quite a good record, I have to say. But let's go back even before that, Tom. Am I right in thinking that you're, as it were, a Surrey lad originally?
Yes, born and lived in Surrey all my life.
Right.
Not very adventurous.
But doubtless travelled around quite enough with your work.
Oh, in my business career, I've travelled extensively, particularly when I was in the pulp and paper industry.
Absolutely, yes. And then you were at school also in the south of London.
Yes, in Beulah Hill, yeah.
Yeah. And from there you went on to, I think you went straight on then to start doing your articles as an accountant. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I finished my higher schools, now called A-levels, when I was 17. In those days, you couldn't go to Oxbridge unless you'd served your 2 years in the forces, national service. So in the end, I decided to go straight into articles, chartered accountant, and do my national service afterwards, provided I passed the exams. And that's how it emerged.
So tell me about the national service bit. Who were you with in the national service? Which forces?
I was called up in the army. I was called up into the Royal Ulster Rifles and commissioned later on in what is now the Royal Logistics Corps.
Ah, yes, which was, it was the Royal Corps of Transport and various other things, wasn't it?
Various other things, that's right.
Yeah. But presumably you were in the Ulster Corps because you had family connections with Northern Ireland.
Well, my father's family came from Northern Ireland. That's the only reason why I think I ended up there, but for my basic training.
But that's a good excuse. I worked for Robert Runcie when he was Archbishop, and he was in the Scots Guards. Right. Not that he ever lived in Scotland, but his father had been Scots,
Yes.
Same thing.
Same thing.
So, okay, and then when you were in the national service for 2 years?
2 years in those days, yes.
Where did they send you?
Well, I volunteered to go overseas, but of course it never works out that way. But I nearly got caught up in the Suez crisis with about 6 months of my service to go. Eden and Co. Launched this extraordinary venture in the Suez Canal, and I was given orders to go to a transit camp in the south of England, and had it not been called off after about 6 days, I would have been shipped out there.
Oh, so I expect you were quite glad it was called off.
I was, because I was approaching the end of my service, and I was much more interested in getting my first job in the real world.
Yes. So had you spent most of your time in various bases in this country?
Yes, I was stationed in Newcastle for about 9 months, and then Halifax in Yorkshire for another 9 months.
Oh yes, I know Halifax, because it was part of Wakefield Diocese, but also, is it the Duke of York's? Which regiment was it?
The Duke of York's, yes.
Yes, I thought so.
Yes.
Well, they still had connections even recently.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
And of course, there is that expression, from hell, Hull and Halifax, the good Lord deliver us.
And okay, and then you, so when you finished your articles, and you did those unusually for someone from Surrey with the Scottish examinations, is that right?
Yes, and the firm I was articled with was called Smedley Rule and Co., and most of the partners were Scottish Institute members. And in those days, you went with the particular institute to which the partner was a member, But my father was a member of the English Institute, and because he qualified in 1926, he actually got second place in the English Institute exams.
But presumably, Tom, I know if you do law, if you do Scottish law, then that doesn't prepare you for being a lawyer in England, whereas presumably the accountancy things are interchangeable.
Yes, they are. The only snag was I did have to study Scottish commercial law and also Scottish trust accounting, which is completely different from anything in the rest of the United Kingdom.
Has it been of use to you ever since, at any time since, or not?
Not the Scottish element particularly.
No, no.
Although as it happened, several of the companies I've been involved with were Scottish based, but that was coincidence.
Now, we have one thing in common, that we both started our career after education in the oil industry. I worked for Shell for 3 years, and you worked for Labitos.
Yes, that was my first job in the real world, really, yes, yes.
And what did you do there?
Well, I was recruited as an assistant accountant in the London head office. And after 2 years, my direct boss there decided to go into the city. And to my astonishment, I got promoted at a very early age to be group chief accountant.
Goodness me. And where was your base? In the city?
It was in the West End, actually, in Pall Mall.
Right, yeah.
It was a small head office. We had operations in Peru, Ecuador, Canada, Holland, and a big operation in London, not in London, in Stanlow, next to the Shell installation there.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. And from there, you went into, that's when you really then leapt into the paper industry, wasn't it, with British Tissues?
I had a short spell with Kaiser Ullman. In those days, it was a smallish investment bank, right, just floated on the stock exchange. And I had an opportunity to go there, which I decided to take. And it was a very valuable experience. But from there, I was headhunted to go into the paper industry.
And that was with British Tissues?
No, to Invest Group.
Oh, Invest, straight away.
Yes, well, British Tissues was part of Invest at one time.
So do tell us a bit about Invest, the group, and is it still going, or has it been taken over? Or
no, it's most of the major paper companies in Britain have either closed down completely or been taken over. In our case, we made most grades of paper and packaging board and specialty products, except newsprint. We were at number 4 in the British paper industry and the second largest in fine papers.
So fine papers would mean what sort of?
Well, for printing, business printing, letterheads, catalogs, mail order stuff, and things like that. Yeah.
Did Invest also make paper that you might use in books, textbooks, or novels?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Plenty of book papers, magazine paper. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So presumably quite a vast range of different sorts of product.
Yes, yes. And in those days we had 10 paper mills in Scotland and parts of England. But by the time we finished, there were only 7 left.
Really? Yes. Well, I gather that that's the sort of the broad story of paper making in Britain. But did you have any excitements? I mean, as it were, when you were with Invest, did you do some international travel or?
I did a lot of international travel, yes. Well, one of the first things I did when I appointed finance director was to discover they'd gone into a huge operation in the United States, building a pulp mill down in Louisiana. And when I saw the documents, I said, this is far too big for Invest, and it was financed entirely in US dollars. So we had a currency exposure, but we couldn't really stop the thing at that point. We were in partnership with an American company, but 2 or 3 years later, when under Wilson's government, the pound was devalued by 16 2/3%. So then the board realized that they had to get shot of it because our borrowing expressed in sterling shot up by that amount.
So you were something of a prophet there, were you?
Well, I wasn't very popular at the time, but later on, I managed to sell it in 1969 to Georgia Pacific, a large American paper and pulp company. Yeah. And we became their largest customer in Western Europe for wood pulp.
But I noticed that alongside these things, or after them, I don't know quite how the chronology works. You've done really quite a number of honorary things, voluntary things. I think the Post Office Users Council, the Cabinet Office work you've done. Can you say a bit about some of those?
Yes, well, my full-time career with Invest came to an end in 1983. Georgia Pacific had acquired Invest, a move that I thoroughly supported because it needed much bigger formations. But in 1983, Georgia Pacific altered their entire policy. And instead of expanding, they decided to sell all their UK and other operations overseas. So then I just been offered the opportunity of becoming chairman of this Quango Post Office Users National Council. So I decided it was the time to start a non-executive career. So that was my first appointment. By the long arm of coincidence, much later on, it had changed, his name was changed to Postcom, and Nigel Stapleton, a colleague in the stationers company, he became chairman of that much later on.
That's interesting. Yes, good crossover there. Yeah. But then alongside that, you did things with the Cabinet Office, is that right?
Yes, yes. Well, when it was only part-time, the Post Office users, and then they decided, I did 2 terms and another term of 2 years as well. 10 years was quite a long time. And then I was invited to join the Cabinet Office to help launch the Charter Mark Award Scheme, which was designed to encourage public sector bodies to think much more of their users, or their customers, as they like to call them now. So I was asked to head up the assessment process as a non-civil servant in a sea of civil servants.
And how then, did I see something also about the Queen's Award you were mixed up with?
Yes, then after about 6 years doing that Cabinet Office job, they decided to outsource the whole process. So I did a year on the sort of judging panel of that, and then I moved on to the Queen's Award office, which encourages international trade, exports primarily. And I found that very interesting because it was a mixture really of the public sector and the private sector. And I enjoyed that very much indeed. And then eventually that was outsourced as well. So that came to an end.
And that was when, all in the 80s or 90s now, are we?
Well, we're probably in the middle 80s to middle 90s was the post office job. Then the others followed after that.
Ah, even later, yeah.
Yes. And I combined that with some commercial non-executive chairmanships too in other industries.
But then also, I mean, you've done an extraordinary amount in this whole non-executive world. I mean, the printing charity and the Prince's Trust.
Yes, yeah. I did that until very recently, actually. Yes,
say a bit about what about the Prince's Trust? What were you doing there?
Well, the Prince's Trust there, I started as a mentor coordinator, and also served on the judging panel of the award. And it evolved over the years, and that they discontinued the mentoring coordination, but there's still plenty of mentors going around. But then I carried on with the judging panel. Then I called it the launch group, and I did that until about 2 years ago, when I thought it was time to hang up my boots.
And talking of hanging up boots, now what is your great love? Is it golf?
Well, golf is my main therapy nowadays. Golf plus bridge.
Yes.
And I used to play a lot of sport. I used to play a lot of tennis at one time, was my main sport. And then I did cricket as well. I wasn't very good at cricket, but I loved it and still do. And squash I played till I decided to give it up, or it gave me up perhaps. And then golf followed.
So I like squash. I wasn't very good at it, but I enjoyed squash. I love watching cricket. But when I was at school, I rather adhered to the old proverb that cricket was hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of extreme danger.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, one of the troubles with cricket is that you only get sort of coaching at school if you're good. But how do you become good? And I was never really that guy. I played for the house, and the school second 11, I think, or third 11, something like that.
Yes, I think we've probably got better at that, because I can remember the same was true about art at school, in the school I went to, that if you were seen to be really quite talented,
Yes.
they'd spend a lot of time on you. But if
That's
you
what-
weren't, then you didn't really get very far.
No, absolutely.
No, yeah. But then take us now into the world of livery companies. You've
Yeah.
been master of 3, including stationers.
Yes.
What got you in? Is the playing cards first, was it?
Well, the playing cards, one of the specialty products we made at Invista was playing card board, the special magic material from which cards are made. And the main customer in Britain then was John Waddington. So that's how I got involved with that, because Waddingtons were very big in the livery there. And also De La Rue, who had been in playing card making, but sold to Waddingtons, that they had a number of members of the livery there. And we also supplied passport paper, currency paper, not for British banknotes, but for other countries' banknotes, and other security products. So when I joined the makers of playing cards, I met some of our customers immediately, who I knew already. Yeah.
And presumably that was your mother company then, the
Yes.
playing cards.
Yes.
But that meant that by the time you got to stationers, you were well established and you could bring skills you'd learnt in the other company.
Well, I was still very junior when I joined the stationers at the livery, because I'd just been promoted to the top job at Invista. And I was going around meeting people who were important, if you like, to the industry. And I went up to see the Paper Research Association, which later merged to form PARA. And the man running it said to me, "Why aren't you a stationer?" So I said, "Well, I've just joined the makers of playing cards." So he said, "Nonsense, my boy." He said, "You must be a stationer. I shall put you up." And I'm master this year. So that was George Riddell. So how could I refuse that one?
Oh, that's very good indeed. And then was it much later you joined the marketors?
Yes, a little later, around 1975, the marketors, who'd been sort of trying to form a guild based upon the Institute of Marketing, now called the Chartered Institute of Marketing. And one of our major customers, who was a bricklayer and tiler, and another one from the blacksmiths company, they'd been invited to help the marketors. And so this major customer of ours said that he'd appreciate very much if I would help that as well. So that's how I got strong-armed into the marketors.
And you became their master?
Eventually, yes. But I had to say to the marketors, I was about to become master of the playing cards, and I was on the court of the stations by then, so that I couldn't possibly contemplate being a master of the marketors until I had done the other 2.
And I suppose my last question really would be back to stationers again. Of all the things that have come to you while you've been part of the stationers as master on the court, what are the things that you found distinctive about stationers alongside the things you did with the other companies?
Well, the stationers, first of all, is a much larger company numerically, and secondly, it has this marvelous hall of ours. So that brings a lot of, because it's really our biggest asset, but also our biggest liability in terms of maintenance over the years. And it's been a great joy to me to be associated with stationers all these years. And because perhaps of my financial background, I got involved, once I was on the court, I got involved with the finances and the investments of the company almost continuously to this very day, because various committees were formed, and I found myself there. And we had once upon a time a finance and investment committee, and then it was merged with the Marston Wardens for a short while. Then it was branched out again. And then, of course, much more recently, we formed the Stationers Hall charity, and I was still a trustee of that, and so on and so on. So
well, yes, but in very recent years, I can well remember you as the treasurer and keeping us on a good, well-steered course in the court then. So, Tom, we've been. I'm so pleased that I've had the chance to have this conversation, because normally you have brief chats, don't you, with people at dinners with a lot of noise going on. So it's been marvellous to hear some of this. And I think you've given us a real insight into the company and into the livery and paper industry generally. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and be part of a conversation.
Well, thank you, Master. It's been a great privilege and honour to be selected for one of these interviews, but I've enjoyed them all so far.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Master.